Abstain.
And we have the resolution for 117 Valley Road. I have to abstain, and I don't otherwise have changes, but does anyone have any changes to that resolution? Someone want to move the resolution?
Move approval of the resolution.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Abstention? Abstain. And for the record, Mr. Moore is here, and I'll give him a chance to get settled before I start reading. The first application is that of Key S. Lee for property at 14 College Avenue. This is an application for a variance to construct a deck addition to an existing dwelling at the subject property. The property is in the R1 one-family zone district. The property is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 7 in Block 1001. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45D to permit a rear yard setback for the deck addition of less than the required 25 feet. A variance is also requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45E to permit a maximum building coverage greater than 25%. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in a matter pending before the board?
Yes.
State your name and address.
Kai S. Lee, 14 College Ave, Montclair, New Jersey.
Okay, do you want to tell us what you're proposing to do with the addition?
So I would like to add a small deck behind my house with a pergola roof. And it seems like in the process, we found that adding a small deck in the back of the house, since our property is so small, would go out of the zoning, I guess, restriction about a certain percentage of the building being less than 25% of the total square footage, and also the setback distance of 25 foot from the back, the center of the back property line. So I'd like to request variance to allow the building of the small deck behind my house. And that's the, I guess, the gist of the request.
So, Mr. Lee, the rear yard setback you're seeking is 22.7 feet where 25 feet is required, is that correct?
Yes.
And the maximum permitted building coverage is 25% of the lot. You said you're exceeding that, and is it 28.6% that you're seeking?
Yes.
Are there questions from members of the board? Mr. Fleischer?
I'll just ask the basic, the simple question was, every foot or two we can pull it back in is a foot or two less deviance from the zoning ordinance. So you have basically an 11-foot deep deck, according to the documents
Right.
we have. Would 9-foot work? Is there something magical about the 11? You could have the 9 foot of the whole thing, and you could have the steps extend beyond that if you wanted to, so you're not losing the area that you're losing to the steps anyway in terms of the, you have the steps built. I'm just looking to further reduce the deviation without causing you grief. So if you can do that and still, put a table out there and chairs, or some lounge chairs and still make it work,
Yeah, so I mean...
that makes it a little easier for us.
Right. So I understand. It's always not easy going against, trying to change some things. If you look at some of the drawings, I actually try to come up with a lot of different arrangements, and I actually, if I make it a little smaller, it almost defeats the purpose of actually having the deck, especially with a cover on it. So yeah, I think the reason why we're having such a difficulty is because my property is unusually small compared to other lots in Montclair. So it seems like, I mean, I understand that, I understand the spirit of the law with the arrangement to limit the amount of the building structure to a certain degree, but I think in my application, in my particular situation, it's really not a big deck that I'm trying to build. Even this unit that I'm trying to build here, it's just not a big deck. But it would make a really nice addition to my house.
Do you have any plans to enclose this deck at any point in time?
So you'll see that in my plan, I plan to put a cover on it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Do any of your neighbors have anything comparable? Adjacent? Any adjacent?
Yeah,
neighbors?
adjacent to my right, they actually have an enclosed, like an extension, but that's not what I'm looking for.
And the neighbor to the north, so we're,
Yeah, exactly right.
has a deck on the second story.
Yeah.
On the side near your property line, is
Right.
that correct?
And just, Graham, could you clarify where the 25-foot is being measured at?
So the rear yard setback, it's measured from this, well, it's to the nearest point of the structure from the nearest property line, from the nearest line. So as indicated and dimensioned on the submitted drawings, the 22.7-foot line is to the, I guess that's the southwestern corner of the proposed deck.
And without being cute about it, at the current point of the house, how far is that from the property line if you measured to the point where the property line is closest to it?
I think I measured that.
Because one of my questions is, it's measured to a spot, but it's not the furthest spot on that rear yard, it's...
Yeah, so
The center spot.
I should have clarified, in my memo on page 4, I note that the existing dwelling has a rear yard setback of 25 feet to the one-story portion of the dwelling at the rear, and that is measured, a scale measured the survey to that, it's the nearest corner of the one-story addition portion to the rear property line is 25 feet.
But in each case, you're measuring it at the specific point.
Cor-
For example, if you measured it on the other side of this deck, it
Right.
would be a lot more than.
Mhm.
So that's why I'm just trying to
Yes.
clarify how we're picking the spot that we're measuring it from.
So the
I'm trying to
nearest
see if
point of
maybe
the-
it averages 25 feet. I'm looking, I'm trying to understand
Sure,
whether
sure.
it, and obviously we don't have this in a surveyed, detailed drawing. It's a CAD sketch.
Mhm. Yeah, so administratively, how the office has interpreted this is to measure from the point closest of the structure to the closest point of the rear line.
Okay, and that's what's the 22 and a half.
Correct.
But we do see it,
Yeah,
it probably keeps getting bigger as it goes further, further to the north.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
I don't know if it's on. It's not lit. Oh, there it is. Sorry. So if the, Graham, if the 2 feet were removed from the deck, do we have a sense of how that would correlate in terms of the building coverage on the lot?
so I don't have that specifically. The applicants didn't provide the raw square footage totals, so it was difficult for me to kind of calculate. So I don't know how that would calculate out.
And then the cover for the deck, is that a glass cover? Or what are we looking at?
What I'm planning is put like a pergola on it and put polycarbonate. It's like a corrugated polycarbonate. It's like a known solution for these type of decks. It looks cool.
Corrugated plastic?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So it's more, it's not wavy, but it's similar kind. It's the same material. It's a very durable material. It doesn't break. But it will be more or less translucent and clear.
Can you go over how you calculated the lot cover? What,
The lot coverage?
Yeah, the calculation of the lot coverage.
So if you look at the dwelling, if you look at the existing two-story frame dwelling, except for where in the front where it says platform, I basically got the square footage from the scale drawing of the lot. And then I compare that to the square footage of the entire, the property lines and in the scale drawing. And then I added the square footage of the proposed deck, and that's the percentage that we came up with.
So you excluded the stairs, the front stairs, and little platform there, correct?
Yeah, the platform, yeah, well, in my calculation, that platform, which actually does not really have a cover, it's more like a step. I did not include it in my coverage of the area calculation.
And then for the deck, did you include or exclude the couple of stairs going down from that?
I actually included that, so if we actually take that out, there we go.
It's not going to help much.
Yeah, so my opening from the house is actually on the right-hand side of the house. So you see that there's actually like a little L that makes, so that's a exit from the kitchen, so
That's
it's
what I
actually the
assumed.
most practical area to exit out of from. So, I mean, I tried a lot of different kinds, I met with the planning many times to try to come up with the different arrangements.
Do you have what the lot coverage of the house was without the deck? I'm trying to work backwards to figure out what difference if we shrunk the size of the deck, we would.
Or what the square footage of the deck is, the proposed deck. We could get to that.
Or the square footage of the deck, but I'm
Either one, whatever's more readily.
partially trying to confirm the 28.6% too, that I don't want to, he's probably down to 28.4 when you exclude the stairs.
Every 36 feet, every 2 feet of deck removed would take out about 0.7% of coverage. Square feet is 1%.
I think my current deck is probably about 240 square foot right now. That's actually including the small staircase. So, rough calculation gives me about 1190 for the square footage of the house. For it to be a for it to be at about 25%,
It's just under 25%.
So it's just under 25%.
So 1250. To be at 25%, I only have like 60.
Right, you have...
No, you couldn't get there, we know that.
Yeah.
Other questions from members of the board?
What if you change the shape so that maybe for like the first few feet, you follow along the storyline so that you're measuring against part of the fence that goes further back? Would that reduce to get to 20,
So
25?
put an angle?
Either an angle, just so that, see how your back fence angles outward, giving you more room. If you follow the storyline, the side, if you don't start if you follow the line of the one story
Yes, yes, yes.
further north, and then,
Go like parallel to the
Right.
property line?
yeah, just so you might get the distance, so you wouldn't have to worry about the first
The setback.
variance.
First two modules
I see.
shouldn't be designed.
I mean, you may have to measure that, but I think it might give you some space.
So kind of like follow the contour of the back property line?
Yeah, or just start like at that point where the break is and it starts to go back. If you
Yeah.
started the edge of the deck there, at least that I'm just throwing it out there.
I think-
I'm not even sure how that would look.
I think the explanation is, if you took out the first four modules of the pergola in the top left corner, right? That would set you up roughly 8 feet or whatever size those units are further over.
Right?
And that would also move the point of measurement further over.
Right.
It's still going to be
It's going to be tight.
it's still going to be a variance. I think that's not, I think you got a variance in any case. I'm not sure that you get away with it without that.
Yeah. So like the point at which the property line, the story line actually ends, that's where the staircase starts. So
Now, that I didn't understand. It looks like the staircase, according to your sketch, which says new attached deck, starts a bit further, much further out than.
Than the
We're
property.
saying if you took that one-story building unit and drew the line across it, just followed it maybe for 2 modules, you would move the whole unit over about 4 feet or 5 feet, and that would give you more depth. I think we're probably beating.
All right, okay. Are there any members of the public who have any comments, testimony, questions, anything you want to say about the application? Okay. Is there anything further you wish to add before we discuss and vote on the application? Yeah.
oh. Yeah, I mean, nothing other than I don't believe that this is actually a major variance. I understand that there's some terms, of course.
Okay, we'll start discussion with Mr. Simon.
I generally don't have a problem with it, just because it is kind of contained within his property. I don't think it encroaches on the neighbors in any way, so in any redesign, I think that we wouldn't gain a significant amount that would avoid a variance, so I'm generally in favor.
Mr. Moore?
I'm also generally in favor of the application. I don't see this causing a hardship to the community or a detriment. So I think that it will add some more aesthetically pleasing, a view of your home, and I think it'll help serve as a good asset.
Mr. Church?
I have no problem with the application. It doesn't do any detriment to the neighborhood. and it does enhance this property, so I'd vote in favor of the application as presented.
Mr. Fleischer?
I'm also in favor of the application. I would have preferred to pull it back a little bit, but I think I can live with it the way it is. It is a shallow lot. It is not a deep lot.
Right.
It's got an odd angle on one side, so it's in a block that has a set of odd shapes just by virtue of the shape of the block. So I think it does represent something, a little bit of a hardship in that case, though that's not the criteria. So I think the minor deviations we're talking about are acceptable to me, because I believe it's over 25 foot for some portions of the deck as it extends over. So I'm in favor of the application.
Mr. McCullough?
I agree with my colleagues.
I'm also in favor. I think the reality, I mean, I was thinking about, what if we moved it back to 10 feet, which I think is a more conventional depth for a deck, but, that makes doesn't really do much in terms of, does virtually nothing in terms of the coverage variance, and does only a little with the setback variance. I think, the reality is the deck gets closer to the northerly property line, it becomes conforming, and I think given the shape of the lot and the location of the house and how they're in relationship to each other, that justifies a variance. So does someone want to make a motion?
Move approval by the application as submitted.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, go build your deck.
Thank you.
Enjoy it next spring. The next application is that of Paul and Amanda Spagnoletti. This is for property at 334 North Mountain Avenue, and designated on the township tax maps as Block 603, Lot 30. This is an application for a variance to construct a single-family dwelling with attached porte cochere. The property contains a single-family dwelling which is to be removed, and the new single-family dwelling exceeds the prescribed building width. The property is located in the R11 family zone. The applicants request a variance from Montclair Code Section 345C4, and that the maximum permitted width of the principal structure shall be 65% of the width of the lot frontages, as they propose a principal structure of a width of 78.25% of the lot frontage. Good. Are taxes paid in those denominations?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Owen, you want to give your appearance and
Thank
proceed?
you. David Owen for the applicants, Paul and Amanda Spagnoletti. I want to make sure, is my telephone, or my microphone working, Mr. Sullivan?
Sounds like it is.
Okay, that's great. This application concerns the property located at 334 North Mountain Avenue in the R11 family zone. The applicants tonight request one dimensional variance from you necessary to construct on the property a proposed single-family dwelling with attached porte cochere, which is the roof and porch structure over the driveway that leads to the rear yard and the detached garage. The property contains a single-family dwelling which is to be removed, and the applicants propose a new single-family dwelling which, because of the porte cochere, exceeds the prescribed building width for the zone. So the applicants request a variance because the maximum permitted width of a principal structure is 65% of the width of the lot frontage, whereas the applicants propose a principal structure including the porte cochere with a width of 78.25% of the width of the lot frontage, which happens to be an even 100 feet. As we proceed, I would ask that you please keep the following points in mind. First of all, the existing single-family dwelling to be removed has a building width of 83.86 feet, or because the lot's 100 feet wide, 83.86% of the lot width. The new dwelling, with a variance granted for the porte cochere, will result in a building width reduction of more than 5 feet. Second, the porte cochere is 1 story It is set back approximately 23 feet from the front wall of the new dwelling. It extends front to back only 22 feet, and it is substantially open so that a car drives through it to go back to the garage. The porte cochere is in part a functional element, and as you will hear in a moment, will assist family special needs, but it is also in part an aesthetic element that harkens back to an earlier time. Third, the new dwelling, including the porte cochere, meets the prescribed side yard setbacks on both sides of the property. And last, the porte cochere is really a complement to the new dwelling and its elegant design. It provides a traditional gateway, a more desirable visual environment, and it fits well within the neighborhood. I plan to call two witnesses. First, Amanda Spaniletti, who's here to my right, and she will introduce the applicants. And second, Paul Sionis, who will explain the design and address the variance. So with that, I will call Amanda, please.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
Amanda Spagnoletti. I'm here regarding an application for 334 North Mountain. However, my current residence is 205 East 85th Street, apartment 19D, New York, New York, 10028.
Thank you.
Okay. Please introduce yourself and your family and explain briefly why you're requesting the variance.
Sure. Hi, I'm Amanda Spagnoletti. I grew up in Montclair. I currently live in New York now with my husband and our 3 children. We're all very excited to get back to Montclair this summer. And I, growing up, we have a house here in Montclair currently, and our plan is to, move into that house this summer, and then down the road, once this house hopefully is built and it's, the way it's going to be, we will be moving into that house at some point. So, growing up, I was always in love with Anderson Park. I've absolutely loved the neighborhood forever. And so, when the opportunity presented itself for us to actually buy something on the block, we jumped at it and we were delighted to get it. We do feel, though, it's very important to us that our house on Anderson Park sort of fit in or match with the rest of the block and with the rest of the neighborhood. And the house that's there, the current existing structure, it's a bit of an outlier. It feels to me a little out of place on the block. It's a 1950s ranch-style house, and all of the houses surrounding it are these very lovely, traditional colonials and Tudors. So to me and to my husband, it just feels a bit, out of place. So the proposed house that we are proposing is intended to sort of rectify that, and it's intended to fit in, we feel, much better with the the scheme of the whole neighborhood and block. As you'll see soon, it's a colonial style house that sort of meets and matches the aesthetic of the rest of the block, and we feel will enhance the beauty of the block. But the proposed plan also does, as you know, involve a porte cochere on the north side of the building, of the house. And that's obviously the reason we're here. We have 2 reasons really for applying for this variance and for wanting this porte cochere. One of them, as David mentioned, is more practical and functional and has to do with our family's specific needs. And the other one, which I realize is more relevant to this hearing and to, for statutory reasons, is the aesthetic appeal of it. But starting with our functional or practical purposes, as I mentioned, we have 3 children, the youngest of whom is our son Nicholas, who is 3.5 years old, sweet as can be, and autistic. And I'm not sure if any of you have any experience with children on the autism spectrum, but if you do, you will understand that Nick can be very challenging, and in his case in particular, wrangling him in and out of cars can be extremely challenging, to say the least. So, having the cover of the porte cochere, while it seems like it is somewhat of a trivial thing, actually is a life change, like a game changer for me and for my son, because, when it's snowing or raining, having the cover and protection of a roof over our heads while I'm dealing with trying to get him in and out is actually really kind of huge. It's kind of a big deal for us. It's the difference between me and him getting soaking wet or not for, 15 minutes or 20 minutes, however long it takes to get him in and out. We actually, the house that we currently have in Montclair has a porte cochere, which is where we got the idea for a porte cochere, and it's actually proved to be tremendously helpful to us and really useful. So setting all that aside, because I know that's not really why we're here, the second reason, and probably the more important reason, is the aesthetic appeal. I mean, we feel very strongly that, if done right, a porte cochere can be absolutely lovely. We think it will, definitely enhance the beauty of the house. As David mentioned, it's open, and while we really do, we understand the reason for the variance ordinance and, or the zoning ordinance rather, and we actually really do agree with the underlying, reasons and basis for the ordinance. I really agree with it quite strongly. But in this case, we are proposing something that's not a solid structure. It's not something that's going to kind of elongate the house or widen the house. It's very open. It's really just 4 columns and a roof that you can see right through. And quite frankly, I think it's beautiful, as I hope you will agree when you see the slide. And that's it.
Okay, I don't have anything further.
Any questions from members of the board?
But I think there may be questions from Mr. Sionis more than, and I have a question for Graham.
Yes.
The issue of coverage. If that did not have columns on the outside, let's forget about style, but was merely something that was pinned off.
Like cantilevered with a bracket support.
Bracketed or pinned off the side of the building without the columns, would that be counted, since it would be open and no support, no structure? Is that, I guess my question is that counted towards the width? That's a question.
Are you asking if it was detached? Is that a different way?
No,
Not if it was deep.
I wasn't going there. I was asking if it didn't have the columns, if it was literally not like an awning, but it's a theater mark, call it whatever you want. It's hanging out
Gotcha.
there. It's supported by tiebacks that can be done quite elegantly. Would that still count as building width?
We do not consider those types of treatments or building elements to be considered part of a structure because they do not have a support that goes to the
Because they
ground.
do not have a support. So,
Correct.
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is there may be ways of providing you with what you need. The house's presence is the presence on the street, and though the porte cochere may be nice, we may be able to find a way of providing you with the coverage you need without having to have the columns coming down, and therefore give you what you need for your son, and give you the coverage you need for your own practical needs without needing to grant a variance. And so I was going to go back when Mr. Sionis came up and discuss with him whether or not something like that might be a viable option that would not require us to go through the variance process.
Can I ask a question while you're contemplating that? So on your design, you have, as part of the second floor plan, a roof terrace. So can you say something about that? Because that would suggest to me that you're not just looking just for the purposes of coverage, if I'm reading this properly. I mean, it's coming off the master bedroom, there's a doorway, so.
I mean, that was just something that we thought would be nice if we had the porte cochere. That's not something that we, feel terribly strongly about or anything. That was just.
But you are thinking about it as functional
Yes,
space.
yes, we were, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? You want to call your next witness?
You want to do questions from the public, or?
I
Okay.
think it's going to
Mr. Sanos,
intermingle with Paul's.
you want to raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address, please.
My name is Paul Sionis. My address is 8 Hillside Avenue, Montclair, New Jersey.
And, Mr. Chairman, I am tonight offering Paul as both an expert in architecture and in professional planning, and I'd ask you to accept them as you have done in the past. Thank you.
And
Okay.
I have one exhibit that I will distribute.
And we're going to mark that as A1.
Okay, Paul, I'd like you to begin by reviewing the existing conditions and then move into the new home.
Okay, so I'll backtrack, though. First, the exhibit that I've distributed is a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, and this is exactly what you will see on the slides. And we have copies on 11 by 17-inch paper of those slides. So slide number 1, which is up on the screen now and in front of you, it's from Google Earth map, or a Bing Maps satellite view, shows that 334 North Mountain Avenue is on the west side of North Mountain Avenue. It's approximately half of the way between Parkside Place to the south, which is on the east side of North Mountain Avenue, and Bellevue Avenue to the north. As you can see from this map, it's surrounded by single-family houses all along North Mountain Avenue and also along the easterly side of Upper Mountain Avenue to the rear. And it's directly across the street from, or to the west of, Anderson Park, which is one of the reasons why the applicants are interested in this property. It's a beautiful view from this lot. The second slide is from the Township of Montclair tax maps, and I've highlighted the property in orange. So you can see it's a rectangular shaped lot. It's 100 feet by approximately 195 feet in depth. It's almost a half of an acre. It's 19,471 square feet in size. And it's similar to the other properties in the neighborhood. Some are slightly larger, but many of the lots are similar in size to this lot. Next slide, number 3, is the zoning map. And as you can see, the property is in the R1 single-family zone, so everything with that same color is in the R1 zone. Directly behind it along Upper Mountain Avenue is the RO zone. And you can see a dark green line that separates this property and several of the surrounding properties from the area behind it and also to the south of it, and that's a steep slope zone. So this property is not within the designated steep slope zone that Montclair has established. Slide number 4 is the existing survey map of the property. So the image on the left of the slide is the survey map that was prepared by Pronesti surveyors. This was colored for better visibility. You can see the existing footprint of the house on the property, the existing circular drive in the front of the property. And then the top right is a photograph of the house that's currently on the property. And you can see that's an existing 1.5-story house. It was constructed in 1955 according to the Montclair tax records. And that house is wider than the house that's proposed. It's 83.9 feet wide, or 83.9% of the lot width. And as I stated, that house has a circular drive. The applicants are proposing to keep the circular drive, but to make it nicer. It also has a one garage door that's right on the front of the house that faces North Mountain Avenue. And as most of you are familiar with these properties, these properties slope from the rear to the front, or from the west side to the east side down to North Mountain Avenue. Next slide, number 5, is the proposed site plan. And this indicates or shows the proposed house. So we're proposing a new 2.5-story single-family house with a detached garage. Many of the properties in this neighborhood have detached garages in the rear of the property, which is fairly traditional, and the applicants had asked for that rather than having a garage at the front of the property with garage doors that face or are closer to the street. So the proposal is to maintain the existing circular drive at the front of the dwelling, but with much improved aesthetics. So there'll be pavers to break up the center of the circular drive. There'll be decorative wall at the front portion of the center of that circular drive. And also the important thing, if you've driven through this neighborhood, North Mountain gets pretty busy with cars parking on both sides of the street, people who use Anderson Park. So it's difficult for many of the people who live on this west side of North Mountain to back out of their driveways. It's difficult for sight visibility because of the cars parking on the street, who people visiting or using the park. The park is a beautiful park and it's very popular. Everything with the application conforms to zoning requirements except for one thing, and that's the proposed porte cochere, which is going to be open. Proposed porte cochere is to be on the north side of the house. The house is only 64.83 feet wide, or 64.83%, but the proposed porte cochere is 13.2 feet wide, which requires the variance because the most we're allowed to have on this property is 65% of the lot width. So as Amanda stated, the purpose of the porte cochere is to provide cover over the driveway. It's not to be a solid structure, but it's to be an open structure supported by two sets of columns. So the existing 1.5-story house is to be removed. It's again, it's 83.9 feet wide, or 83.9% of the lot width, but it's all solid walls. In our case, we have 64.8% is solid, but that 13%, that's the porte cochere, will be open on all three sides. So we're also proposing to eliminate the condition that I think is not attractive of that garage door facing the front of the property. And as I stated, we're proposing a detached garage at the rear of the property, similar to the surrounding properties. The next slide, slide number 6, this is a landscape plan. The applicants retain Tapestry Landscape Architecture. It's a great landscape architecture firm from Haskell. We've discussed with them about the use of native plants, so they're proposing majority, or if not all, of the planting for the landscape plan to be native plants. However, I need to note that the south side, the north side, and the rear west side of the property, beginning with the front of the house, are to be surrounded by evergreen plantings. So this will be fairly screened from the rear of the property and both north and south sides of the property. Next slide, number...
This meaning the porte cochere you're referring to?
Well, yes, the porte cochere will also be screened on that north side of the property. It will be screened with evergreen plantings along the property line. Next slide, number 7, is the front elevation or the east elevation of the house. And as was stated, it's proposed to be a fairly traditional style house. It's a 2.5-story classical design, center hall, colonial single-family house. However, it'll have wood clapboard siding. We're proposing slate roof shingles. And again, on this slide, you can clearly see that 1-story see-through or open porte cochere on the right side of the north side of the house. And again, the point is to provide covering over a small portion of the driveway, enough of an area to cover a car. So the porte cochere, as I said, is to be supported by two sets of columns. The next slide, slide number 8, are all 4 exterior elevations of the house. Again, the top image on the slide is the front elevation, and then the top right image is the north elevation, and you can see the porte cochere is set back 23 feet from the front line of the house, the front entryway, and then the porte cochere is 22 feet wide, and that's enough for a car to pull under and provide protection from the elements. And then the other 2 views are the rear elevation is the west, and then the south elevation is the left side of the house. Slide number 9 is the proposed first floor of the house. And as you can see, it's a entry foyer, music room, library, guest room, kitchen, family room, sunroom, and dining area. And then that right side where it shows the porte cochere, that will be completely open or see-through, and that's where you see the 2 sets of columns that would support the porte cochere. Next slide, number 10, that's a streetscape showing the proposed house set among the 2 surrounding neighbors. The house to the left, or to the south, 330 North Mountain Avenue, and then the house to the right, which is 338 North Mountain Avenue. The house fits in pretty well with the streetscape. This design is more typical of the design of the houses on the street than the house that's currently there that was built in 1955. There are a lot of center hall colonials, with exceptions, of course, but it works well with the two surrounding properties. And the vertical lines shown are where the property lines are between these properties, those dot dash black vertical lines. And you see the proposed porte cochere for 334 North Mountain Avenue, which is our subject property. You can also see 338 North Mountain Avenue to the right or to the north that also has a porte cochere that we were lucky enough to design probably about 15 or 20 years ago. The next slide, number 11, that's a streetscape rendering. So this is where we took a 3D image of the proposed house and inserted it into a photograph of the two surrounding properties, showing the two surrounding properties, and then worked with a rendering company to incorporate it into the photograph. So this, again, shows how the proposed house fits in amongst its neighbors. It shows that porte cochere on the right side or north side of the house. You can see how it's set back from the front of the house, the front line of the house, and you can also see how it's open and not a solid structure. So then I'll discuss zoning. So the application conforms with everything in the zoning ordinance, all of the zoning ordinance requirements except for one, and that's we're seeking a variance for the maximum permitted building width, which is 65%. And with the porte cochere, as I stated, we will have a building width defined as 78.25% of the lot width. So with the porte cochere, we're exceeding the allowable building width by 13.25%. So the porte cochere, since this is a 100-foot wide lot, porte cochere is 13.25 feet wide. And the purpose, again, is strictly to provide a covering over the proposed driveway. There's currently not a driveway leading to the back of the property because the house is wider. There's only the front circular drive and the garage in front. But by pulling the house in width as we are, we're allowing for a driveway to go to the rear of the property to a new two-car garage. So as I stated, even though this is a variance request, the proposed width of the house is 78.25% of the lot width versus the existing house, which is 83.9% of the lot width. Again, it's a 1.5-story house compared to a proposed 2.5-story house, but our encroachment is strictly this porte cochere, which is see-through and only 1 story. So we're reducing the width of the building on the lot by 5.5%. Again, the porte cochere is open and see-through. There are no solid walls. It's supported by 2 sets of columns. The porte cochere is set back 23 feet from the front line of the home. It's only 22 feet deep. It's enough for a car to pull under. And as Amanda stated, the porte cochere provides a valuable function in that it's providing a roof covering over the driveway so she could pull up in her car and help her son get in and out of the car. In addition to serving this need, the porte cochere looks, in my opinion, aesthetically correct. It looks good. It looks like it should be there. It adds something nice and more attractive to the house. So slide number 13 provides additional justifications. So this is not a hardship variance. It's not a hardship argument, but it's considered a C2 variance. So with a C2 variance, the application looks at a specific piece of property. So now, first of all, the application promotes the purposes of zoning. And by that I mean it promotes a desirable visual environment through thoughtful design. In other words, it's an attractive proposal. The porte cochere looks nice. It looks like it belongs to as part of this house. Second is that the variance promotes light, air, and open space for the adjoiner, especially the adjoiner to the north. We're not proposing a solid addition to the house, but we're proposing this open structure, just a flat roof supported by a total of 4 columns. So that promotes light, air, and open space as compared to a solid structure. The variance could be granted without substantial detriment to the public good. The benefits of the deviation substantially outweigh any detriment. The variance will not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and the zoning ordinance because the new home and the porte cochere are pretty consistent with the strong and tasteful residential neighborhood that's there now, and because it meets all the other zoning requirements. And then I need to point out that the purpose of yard setbacks is to protect the adjoining neighbors or the adjoining properties from intrusions of sound, light, glare, and other objectionable factors. So we're not intruding on the neighbor with sound, light, glare, or objectionable factors. This is a pretty minor structure that's open. So we're increasing the building setback on the north side from the current 9.3 feet to 10 feet at the pergola, at the porte cochere. It looks like a pergola, but the 10 feet is to this open porte cochere, which is similar to a pergola. So there's another 13 feet of distance from the northern edge of the pergola to the northern solid wall of the house. So it has a perceived setback of 23 feet. And then I reviewed the master plan, and largely the master plan doesn't address the R1 zone specifically, but one point the master plan makes is to keep residential neighborhoods attractive, and I think this is an attractive addition to this neighborhood.
Okay, I don't have any further questions for Mr. Sionis.
Questions from members of the board? Mr. Simon?
A couple of questions. First, with the proposed building and pool, are there any concerns about impervious surfaces? Because it seems like all the grass has been taken.
So there is no impervious coverage requirement in Montclair.
There isn't, okay. Along with that, though...
I shouldn't say, to clarify, in this zone, there is a separate, yes, and other zone districts do have an impervious coverage requirement. The R1 zone does not.
Okay, but, okay, so along that, with this long driveway being on the hill structure, are there any concerns about creating runoff into the street with that straight paved surface?
Right. A civil engineer has been retained to provide storm drainage design for this property. So we're not going to allow the rainwater to spill down the driveway, but just as was done at the property next door, 330 North Mountain, the dark blue house, an underground storm drainage system was designed to control the storm water. So the same thing is being done with this property.
Okay. And I guess the other technical question, if for any reason in the future, if this was approved and they chose to enclose it, would they have to come back for it, or they could just do, would that be?
That could be a condition that the board could consider, but once, enclosing an existing structure, this would become a structure, so a future enclosure would be permitted unless the board otherwise conditioned this approval.
Okay. That's it.
Other questions?
Will I offer that as an acceptable?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that would be an acceptable condition that, that's obviously not part of the current plan to enclose it, but if someone ever did, we would accept that as a condition.
Absolutely.
Page 10 of the handout that you gave us, are these all, are these to scale?
Yes. Yeah, we, luckily, we worked on 330 North Mountain Avenue, and we also did architecture work for 338 North Mountain Avenue.
I was going to go the path of, there are two things here to think about. One is the one I've already put on the table, which I really think is important to put. And as one of the other board members indicated, the notion that that roof deck over the porte cochere could be occupied, to me, makes it even more of a concern. So one of the things would be that it should not be an occupied thing, that there should not be a door there, but there should be a window or something else, that it should not be an occupiable roof terrace, which is the way it's defined on the documents. The other question, the other path I was going to take was, you have a fairly large-sized property, and you have a lot of elements, and I didn't check what the front yard setback was or what your obligation was relative to the adjacent properties. You might be right on the line. You might have some leeway. The question is, could the house have been designed to be narrower and deeper in order to take into consideration the fact that you feel a porte cochere is an integral part of the design and of the thing. For example, where you have that one story at the back, you have, which extends what I would call the south side closeness to the property line, and therefore the width of the house. If that family room wall were a couple of feet in, then the sunroom wall could be aligned with the guest room. I mean, there are lots of things that could be done to the design to narrow the structure down, to perhaps even incorporate the porte cochere, which you've defined as an integral need in your personal life, but also as a design element. That might very well have been done within the 65 foot. It would just be a different floor plan, a different layout. So, Mr. Sionis, I mean, there are obviously options here when you have a vacant property of a decent sized scale as to how you allocate the property itself in terms of the pool width, the pool depth, the spa, all the other things that are part of this application, which fit nicely in the back. But if the building extended further back by 8 to 10 feet, those things might all still exist, but you might end up with a narrower design. Again, I'm not pushing it. At this stage, I think, for everybody's sake, I'd rather see something that eliminated the need for this variance, and a canopy, as opposed to the porte cochere, would certainly immediately do that if you were willing to go that route. If you don't want to go that route, then I at least have to keep asking the questions about, could this building, which you've designed from scratch, have been made narrower with the understanding that you expected to include a porte cochere as part of the design?
Right. We had a difficult time removing 13 feet in width from the house with the program we were given. We also looked at not having columns for the porte cochere. It got pretty strange looking to have, we do that with commercial buildings all the time, have some type of tie rods holding canopies back, but this seemed to call for those columns with the stone bases and the decorative railing on top.
Which further add a couple of feet to the width because of the stone base and the columns and all the other things.
Right.
And you have 13 foot there, and it's, again, we're talking about inches. We're talking about a couple of feet here or there. And I didn't want to go the path of look at an alternative design
Of course.
that allows you to narrow the house down.
Right.
We did, may I
Yeah, please.
interject to that? Okay. We did, consider this, but first of all, we have a large family. And then we did ask Paul and his team to make the house ADA compliant on the ground level as well, which, because my father is very ill and will likely be spending periods of time with us more frequently going forward. So that, I think, was part of the contributing factors that made it, the inside of the house, a little bit bigger. So that was kind of.
I guess I wish you hadn't said that, because none of the entries into the house, the porte cochere or the front.
No, not the porte cochere, but the rear, absolutely, yes.
But the rear, so that's not even a place you can take someone out undercover, so they have to get out somewhere.
That's true.
And walk all the way to the rear of the house to get in, when you might have been able to adjust the topography to get the drive up to the level of the first floor, and then everybody having a need could enter right on the first floor and go right through the same entry point, and therefore not even have to go that route. I'm just looking at different, I'm looking at a bunch of different things. I still think, when you have a 100-foot property and a fairly deep lot and a lot of space, to start granting variances on width is still a little bit hard for me. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's a little bit hard. And there are a couple of options that don't require you to do that. And the fact that you may like something better doesn't mean it isn't a better option to not require the variance and move forward. Because I've already said, I would certainly insist on a condition that the roof above not be occupied. So your load is a very different load. There's no live load, there's nothing. There's basically a snow load at best.
Exactly.
And it can be done. It either can be bracketed off. We both know enough about structure to know it can either be bracketed off, which doesn't require tie rods.
Right.
Or there are a number of ways of doing it that don't require you to have columns on the outboard side. So I'm looking for something that that you can get the house you want and still not ask us to grant the variance on an otherwise very nice, large lot that could, in fact, the one story that's there, and I know the history of that building for a long time, the one story that's there has a whole different massing impact. It's not the same as the 2.5 story. It's just a low-slung piece there. So you've gone for a much larger house, which is fine, which is great, but on a property this size, I'm not sure you automatically need to have a variance in order for it to meet the functional needs. And the aesthetic needs, I think there are ways of doing it with brackets if you don't like tie rods or other things that would allow you to pretty much get out there without having to put those columns and the stone walls and everything else all the way out on the edge.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions from members of the board? Just, I mean, partially, I mean, there, Mr. Sinos, there are 4 comments on page 5 of the planner's memo, largely to confirm that you don't need other variances, and
Well, I'll address those. So we do not need other variances. One of the items referred to the rear yard coverage. Well, I'll go in order. So first is the applicant should review the heights of the proposed retaining walls in the front and rear yards to confirm compliance with maximum heights. We conform to the height requirements for retaining walls. The rear of the property is allowed to have walls up to 7 feet in height. The maximum height of the wall on this property will be 5 feet at the rear of the property. We're allowed to have walls on the sides or front up to 4.5 feet in height, and the highest our walls on the side will be are 3 feet. Calculation of the rear yard, second was review the calculation of the rear yard to confirm compliance of the accessory building occupancy of no more than 25% of the rear yard. So the applicants are hoping to construct a 2-car garage in addition to a 1-story cabana at the rear of the property. We did the calculations for that, and we're allowed to have a 25% coverage of the rear yard. This garage and the cabana are 21.5% of the rear yard, so we comply with that. The applicant proposes a circular drop-off driveway in front of the dwelling, and Graham points out that off-street parking areas shall not be located between the main building and the curb of the street on which the building fronts. So as I stated, there's an existing circular drive in the front, and the idea is to keep that, but connect it to a driveway leading to the rear. So the applicants want to keep that circular drive in front, not to be able to park on it, but to be able to turn around in it to drive straight out onto North Mountain Avenue, because as I stated before, North Mountain Avenue gets pretty busy and tight on many days. And then the last item was about the residential development fee. So the applicant would have to comply with the development fee requirements.
And then, Paul, did you calculate what the required front yard and rear yard setbacks would be?
Yes. So the existing front yard setback, the house that's there now, is set at 65.265 feet from the front property line. Our proposed house is to be set at 71.4 feet. So we're moving the house back by 6.2 feet, and that 6.2 feet is actually the average of the 4 adjacent houses in the zone. So we took the calculation, and that's shown on our cover page in the chart. Then the rear yard setback, the requirement is a minimum of 48.7 feet of a rear yard setback, and the proposed house is set back 58.75 feet. So we comply with all of the setbacks except for that building width because of the porte cochere.
I just want to ask you one question to clarify the front yard setback. Is it true that under the current law, where you have the averaging condition 2 on either side of the property, the existing dwelling has a non-conforming front yard setback by 6 feet or so?
Yes, by 6
And in
feet.
your design of this dwelling, you met the averaging, so you meet the required front yard.
Right, and by moving the house back by 6 feet from where the existing house is.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm going here, but just so it's clear, so you do have 10 feet to play with in the rear in terms of meeting the rear yard setback. I understand that would have an interesting impact on the pool, the cabana.
Correct.
And then probably also create a problem with the coverage for the accessory structures, but
Exactly. And just, I need to point out that that front yard setback is to the one-story portico with columns at the front, that's proposed at the front, and not to the main wall of the building.
other questions from members of the board? Okay, are there members of the audience who have questions, testimony, statements, anything for either of the witnesses, or just comments on the application?
You're looking at me.
Looking to see if you have anything further, or if you want to sum up, or do you want me to ask you a question first?
I'd like you to ask me a question first.
Okay, so it's my understanding that if the porte cochere is unsupported by columns, it does not count against the building width, and the building would then be conforming. And they could go home, and we can't go on home, but we can move on to the next application. So I guess the question is that something you want to consider, or do you want us to act on what is pending before us?
I hate to remove from the table and leave you here alone, but I'd like 2 minutes to do that so I can speak with my
Yes, I
clients.
think that's...
And the other thing I want to do, I want to put the way you summarized it in slightly a different way. What you're saying is that if we remove the support columns to the north edge of the porte cochere, then we could, as of right, build the proposed building. We wouldn't need any variance from it.
Correct.
2 minutes, maybe 3? What's that?
You know, I wasn't sure how canopies without, because we see canopies all the time on commercial buildings, and they don't count the right in the setbacks, they don't even know whether that was the case. That's the house the Weston's owned for a short period of time. When Judy and Weston's been living under Joshua Baird High Steps. She just went out and bought the house. And then they decided to modify it. Okay. That's great. So they can't do something like that.
Okay, I am ready to sum up. What I think I will do is I will abbreviate everything as much as I can. I want to cover briefly the variance criteria. We've offered, on the positive side of the criteria, various purposes of zoning that we think really support this project. The primary thing is promoting a more desirable visual environment. And that goes right to the heart of the question that you posed just a few minutes ago, Mr. Chairman. And after speaking with our clients, they feel very strongly that the design that they're proposing is really part and parcel of the elegance of the porte cochere. The stanchions really do not have much of an impact. We appreciate the effort to suggest that this can be done without having the stanchions, using brackets or tie rods or something like that. They just feel very strongly with the design. I would point over to sheet 11 again, if everyone would just take a second to do that. And if you look at this rendering, which is the photograph with the new dwelling superimposed in the middle, and you see the porte cochere over to the right, I do understand completely the idea of having brackets. I think another way to put this would be that the porte cochere would be cantilevered in some way, as opposed to having the stanchions. But if you look at the rendering here, we think the stanchion is really fairly modest, does not have much of an impact, is actually part of the elegance of it. And if you go to sheet 10, which is the preceding sheet, you'll see that we have the exact same thing at 338 North Mountain Avenue, which, by the way, also has a circular driveway. But it has this, I'll call it a minor element, the stanchion that is holding it up. Again, I appreciate the effort to try to eliminate the variance, but I think it's fair to say that my clients are sort of in love with the porte cochere as it has been designed, and we think that it's not merely a selfish interest. We think that it works well in the neighborhood. We think it fits into the public interest. So with regard to those surrounding properties, I want to recite that this is an improvement over the existing condition, 5 feet shorter overall, and it's building mass that's 5 feet shorter because of the design of that 1 1/2 story building. This is also only 1 story. It's set back 23 feet from the front wall, only 22 feet end to end, and it's substantially open. It has a functional element. It has a strong aesthetic element. My clients feel very strongly about the stanchion. The support areas, they would like to keep them. We do meet the setbacks on both sides, and as Paul pointed out, the effect of the 13 open feet under the porte cochere is to really give you effectively a 23-foot side yard. It's open in that respect on that north side of the property. So this is a traditional gateway. We think it works with the neighborhood, and we think that because we don't require any other relief for all the things that we're doing, it's a minor variance in the context of the zoning ordinance, and also it's not offensive to the master plan in any way. I have a feeling it's going to be difficult to get everybody to vote in favor of this. I'm hoping that since this is a C variance case, we're hoping that a majority of you also like the porte cochere in its traditional presentation, not having a bracket or having a tie rod, but having the stanchion that appears to the public from the streetscape, just in the same way that it does, and it has for years and years, at adjoining 338 North Mountain Avenue. So we hope that a majority of you get behind this and grant this variance. Thank you very much.
We'll start discussion with Mr. Moore.
This is an interesting one. Generally, I am in favor of the application. It's hard to see one of our beautiful old Montclair homes being taken down and a new one, being brought in, because it's a part of the fabric of Montclair. But I think that this design is aesthetically pleasing. I think that it will add value. In regards to the porte cochere, I understand that there, some, of course, it's aesthetics, but there's also reasoning behind it in terms of rain and your youngest, and kind of making things a little bit easier and less of a hardship. So I do take that into consideration. Also, it is pretty compatible with the home to the facing it from here to the right. Looks like a similar design. So I'm generally in favor. I believe Mr. Sionis did read that you'll comply with the planning considerations. Those are some of my restrictions that I would place onto here. And I also look to hear from my colleagues to see what other restrictions that they'll place on top of that. But I'm in favor.
Giving deference to some of the comments by my colleagues that a redesign would take you out of the variance business, I appreciate, and I think that is noteworthy that he gave that information. But I appreciate the fact that your design is your design. This is what you want to live in, probably to your old age. So the porte cochere, as far as I'm concerned, is an element of the neighborhood. As you look at the neighborhood, if you walked it through Anderson Park and looked over, what you're proposing doesn't seem to affect the overall neighborhood. it seems to improve it. Although the house there now, to me, I would have kept it, but that's me. It's a nice design. It's a design that fits in with the overall design of the bigger homes in Montclair, and it certainly fits on that block. Therefore, without any, I see that you complied with all the other requirements that were set forth, and you are complying with that. I don't see any, I have no objection to the point cochere as presented. I have no objections to the maintaining of that, and I have no objection to the fact that there's a doorway on the second floor. My only concern would be that the roof of the point cochere be reinforced somehow so that it becomes a viable deck type of enclosure, not just a roof enclosure, so that there would be some support there so we wouldn't have somebody going through it or have a small disaster there in the future. Therefore, I would be in favor of the application as presented with the point cochere in place, because I don't believe it's detrimental to the neighborhood. It's not detrimental to the overall plan of the master plan in Montclair, nor does it violate any of the restrictions that we would place on other places. Therefore, I would vote in favor of this one, as presented.
I still have a problem. The fact that it meets the side yard requirements is exactly why the township went beyond side yard requirements. They specifically said, in many cases, the side yard requirements are insufficient to meet the bulks of buildings, of the type of buildings that were being built, which met their side yard requirements, but were large in scale, pretty massive in scale. The intent was very, very clear that the 10 and the 6-foot side yard requirements applied only within certain conditions, but they clearly were looking for further spacing between the structures. I think that was the clear intent of the changed zoning ordinance. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So now the question comes in is whether a porte cochere meets the standard. And if the porte cochere is considered structure, I don't know how we turn down the next person that wants structure, an enclosed space there, because they're still going to meet the side yard requirements. So in a sense, we end up mitigating the whole intent and purpose of the modified width requirements for structures on lots. And this is not about, we can't rule against people based on aesthetics, and we shouldn't be ruling in favor of people based purely on the aesthetics of a house design. I think there was a clear intent here, and there are ways of mitigating it which you have chosen not to do. So I will not vote in favor of the variance, and that doesn't mean the variance won't be approved, but I would insist, for everybody's sake, that we make sure that that roof deck can't be occupied. Because if you can occupy the roof deck, then you ought to be able to occupy a structure that would be within the same 65% criteria. So I would think that even if it goes forward to approval, that it should contain a condition that does not allow for occupancy of the porte cochere roof under any circumstances. How you design it is a design, and the design is a design, but I would think that would not be the way to go. And I feel not good about having to grant this type of width variance on a very nicely sized lot that we shouldn't have to deal with this kind of condition, simply because someone likes it better or they'd rather have it a certain way than a different way. I think that's why the ordinance is in place. So I cannot honestly vote in favor of the application.
Mr. McCullough.
Basically, I appreciate the design and do find that aesthetically it is consistent with the neighborhood, especially the houses to the left and to the right. In terms of scale, I frankly appreciate that it's not larger. in terms of the discussion about narrowing the house, I think, based on the visual evidence that I'm looking at, if you were to narrow it, I think it would then be very inconsistent with the houses to either side. So I could not favor that. As far as the porte cochere is concerned, I find that actually is an attractive feature to the house. I appreciate your sharing the functional nature of it. I think that's reasonable. I, at the same time, agree with my colleague in terms of access to that. I would have difficulty voting in favor of that being an extension of the master bedroom. I mean, in terms of having access for the purposes of clearing snow would be a more reasonable argument for me. But I'm concerned, when I sort of look at what is the existing property, particularly in relationship to the house that's on the right. I mean, the existing house is in a much closer proximity to that house currently, and what you've designed essentially takes the main part of the house and moves it further away from. But if there were to be activity on the terrace, then it would defeat that purpose. And so that would be the one thing that would give me cause to vote against this. So otherwise, I am very much in support of this proposal.
Mr. Simon?
I'm going back and forth on this. It's a beautiful design. I think it is well suited for that block and that location. My issue is more with just the general precedent of you're starting with a clean slate. You shouldn't have to design. You shouldn't have to design in a variance, or you could design out any variances. And I'm not completely convinced that all options have been considered in terms of that. So I really have a problem with, it's not even like you're trying to save an existing structure. You really are starting with a clean slate, yet you're coming in for a variance. And this is a pretty large property where you have a lot of creative options to explore. I'm going to hold my vote till I hear from our chairman, but at the current moment, I'm leaning towards not supporting this just for that fact alone. I don't like the fact that people are designing and are not exploring all their options when, especially under this blank slate.
I agree with what Mr. Simon says. I mean, basically, we're looking at this as a vacant lot that's, you're making a decision to remove the existing house, which I agree is out of place. I grew up with watching Heller Way, Heller Drive, Capron Lane being developed behind my house, with a lot of houses that look like this house, which at least they fit in together, though over time a lot of those houses are being replaced by what I'll call normal 2.5-story houses, and not the 1.5-story ranches that were built in the 50s. I think the design is good, but it is a large lot. It's 19,000 square feet. It is a nice rectangular shape that, doesn't present any difficulties. While it slopes, that's not presenting any issues. I just, given that what we're coming down to is an aesthetic preference on their part, that it looks, in their view, it looks better with the columns. I don't know how that rises to the level that justifies a variance. As Mr. Fleischer pointed out, the town was concerned when it passed to 65% of houses being built that were conforming to the side yard setbacks and being overwhelming the lot in which they were being built on and passed the ordinance. And while we have granted some variances for those from that ordinance requirement, they've been in the context of adding on to an existing house and being particular circumstances related to the property, which we could justify on a C1 variance. As Mr. Sionis testified, there isn't a C1 justification to this, and I don't think the aesthetics of having a porte cochere with columns is sufficient to say that creates a desirable visual environment that overwhelms or overrides the substantial impairment of the zone plan, where this was exactly what the ordinance was designed to preclude. And I just don't want us to get involved in a distinction between open spaces and one-story, two-story, and, okay, well, it's, because I'm just not sure where we start drawing the line and keep the ordinance having some meaning. So I cannot vote in favor of the requested variance. Okay. Any further discussion, or does someone want to make a motion?
I'll move to disapprove the requested variance.
Second.
Okay, the roll, Mr. Simon?
No. Well, sorry.
So yes, in favor of the motion.
An affirmative motion is to, yes is to deny the application.
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
No?
Mr. McCullough?
No.
Mr. Church?
No.
Mr. Fleischer?
Yes.
Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
All right, that motion is a no action. It was a motion to deny. So we should make a motion to approve and see where that goes.
Make a motion to approve, would it be giving that they
Would that motion to approve include conditions of no occupancy of the roof, porte cochere, and the condition not to enclose?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Simon?
No.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Church?
Yes.
Mr. Fleischer?
No.
Mr. Harrison?
No.
Okay, the application is denied.
Good luck to you. The next application is that of Vanguard Funding LLC for property at 10 Washington Street. This is an application for a variance to construct an addition to an existing two-family dwelling. The property is in the R2 two-family zone. Property is designated in the township tax maps as Lot 16 in Block 3110. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45B1 to permit a front yard setback for principal buildings of less than the required 25 feet. A variance is also requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45C1 to permit a side yard setback for principal buildings of less than the required 10 feet. A variance is also requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45E to permit a maximum building coverage greater than the permitted 25%. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Harrison, members of the board. Alan Tremulak appearing on behalf of the applicant Vanguard Funding LLC. This application involves property at 10 Washington Street, located in the R2 zone. Property contains an existing two-family dwelling. My client recently purchased the property with the intention of renovating it. The proposed renovations would include an addition to the rear of the structure, as well as a small addition to the front, actually adding a porch. As the notice indicates, we need 3 variances. We're seeking 3 variances from the board for front yard setback. It's resulting from the porch addition, side yard setback variance on the westerly side of the property, and a variance for impervious coverage. The plan provides for 31%. The maximum permitted is 25%. I have one witness who I think the board is familiar with from some prior applications, and that is Organizada Dogan.
Correct.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address, please.
Małgorzata Dogan, 46 West Valley Brook Road, Long Valley, New Jersey, 07853.
Said that much better than I did.
If I come here more often, then everybody can pronounce my name, Małgorzata.
Are you one of the owners of Vanguard Funding LLC?
Yes.
Okay, and did LLC recently acquire this property?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and your property consists of an existing two-family dwelling, is that correct?
Correct.
How was the property being used at the time you purchased it?
Well, I've been trying to purchase this property for almost a year now. It was on the market, off the market. When I first looked at the property, it was, a year ago. It looked more like, I don't know, 4 or 5 families, lived under one roof. I don't know how they even fit there, but definitely more than 2. Then there was a water damage in the property. The lady that had it had an insurance claim. We couldn't get into the house. Part of the house inside was demolished, supposedly by the insurance company. So it's not in a livable condition right now. What I'm trying to do is put an addition on the back and make it more appealing and more functional, regular 2-family home.
Okay, can you discuss the renovations you're proposing for the front of the property, front of the building?
Sure. If you look at the front picture of the property, right now it's just, do you everybody? Yeah? The front is very, I don't know how to say it, not appealing too much. What I would like to do is keep the existing structure, the front where it is, and add a nice open porch to the front, which will provide nice shelter to get into the house in case of snow or rain. But the porch will not move further to the front of the property, no more than the properties on the right and on the left side. So even if I add the front porch, I will still be within the, how would we say it? Within the established setback line with other properties on the back, on the right and on the left.
So you're saying that if you add the porch would be 4 feet in depth, is that correct?
Correct.
And are you saying that, and you're looking at, I should mention to the board, the photograph that's figure 3 in Graham Petto's report. It shows your house and the 2 houses on
Correct.
the side, correct?
Yes.
And are you saying that the addition of the front porch, the 4 feet for the front porch, you would still be set back further from the street than the 2 houses adjoining?
Correct, by a few inches, yes.
Okay.
We can even see it on the survey. Right here on the first page. On the right-hand side, there is like a couple sets of stairs. On the left-hand side, there is a porch. So the property right now ends way further back. I would like to build the porch where the existing landing is. for the entrance, no further than that, which is 4 feet.
And you're proposing some other changes to the front facade also, in addition
Correct.
to the porch, is that correct?
Correct, absolutely. If we go to the third page of the drawings I submitted, top left corner, we have the front porch. We have windows. We have a little bit more dimension in the front facade of the property, and it's definitely more appealing. However, the setbacks will remain the same. We are not pushing the property, further closer to the street.
All right, you want to talk about the addition to the rear?
So when we go back to the first page, this here is the existing structure that's there. I would like to put the addition, which would include a bathroom, a kitchen, and like a family room. To do that, we can keep a 6 feet setback on the left side. On the right side, I would like to continue the addition with the existing footprint of the property, which is at 3.7 feet setback.
So the addition would also, as you just said, continue the 3'7" setback that it
Correct.
for the existing structure. You would not,
Correct.
intrude any further into the side yard
Correct.
than the existing building. Okay. And did you indicate what's the purpose of the addition? What rooms are you adding?
Right. So this is this part here, this is the first floor, and that's the existing structure where we are putting 2 bedrooms and a den. In the addition, I would like to add a kitchen, small dining room, very small, 9 by 9, and a family room. And it would be the same floor plan for the first floor and the second floor.
Okay. And then the third variance that you're requesting is for impervious coverage, where the ordinance requires a maximum of 25, and this plan would provide for 31% coverage. Can you address that variance?
Correct. It's, on those very small lots, way undersized lots, this is not a question of aesthetics. It's just a question of designing functional house and going over by 6% to what's accepted. I'm sorry, right, 14%, right? No, I'm saying right, by 6% is just a matter of building or allowing us to build a functional house.
I just want to clarify that's building coverage, not impervious coverage.
Right.
It's building coverage.
My mistake, yep. Yep. Okay. All right. I think that's all I have from the applicant. Mr. Chairman.
My question is, the second floor unit,
Sure.
think of that. How large is how many square feet is in this apartment?
The second floor is 774 square feet. It's right on the first page, right here on the table. Both apartments are 774 square feet apartments. So,
Oh, no, this is 1,200 square feet on this proposed unit.
I'm sorry. You're right, 1,200. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm a little nervous here still. Yes, but I still get nervous.
One other question I have is just the presentation, what you
have been reversed.
That's what I was.
Yeah, I absolutely, I see it now. It should have been reversed.
But then at least we can say one side of the addition is complying with the yard
Absolutely.
requirement, and the other side is lining up with the existing building.
I can't believe I missed that, yes.
So we can agree that the 6-foot side yard is on the west side.
Correct.
I guess the question then comes down to the size of the unit.
Yes.
Most people would kill for 1,200 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2-bath in New York City.
Yes, in New York City, you're right.
So, one of my concerns is, who are the, and it's not a question of dollars, who's moving here? And I ask the question in the context of, it's an addition that's probably more than 2/3 of the size of the existing house in square footage, I'm guessing.
Well, actually,
Because it's 774, the old one was
existing is
774, and there's 1,200 on the second floor. of the
We're adding
proposed unit, there's about 500 something more, so.
427.
It's roughly 70% the size of the existing, not 100%, it's 70%. So one of the questions is, on sites that are tight, does it have to be a unit that large? Does it have to be a 2-bedroom unit? Obviously, the unit on the first floor is only a single bathroom unit. It's a 2-bedroom, it's a single bathroom. So the question is there any way of narrowing it a bit to get a little more for your unit? Or do you think this is what the market will demand in terms of your ability to, and I presume you're going to rent the units or
Yes.
maybe sell them, I don't know.
Rent them.
But, and to that degree, therefore, make it potentially more affordable. That's
Correct. Well, from my experience, and I own a couple properties in the neighborhood, once the apartments are around the 1,200 square feet, maybe a little under 1,100 square feet, if I can say they are flying off the market, they are flying off the market. I completely remodel them, I put brand new electric, brand new plumbing, central air, and I don't ask for a high rent. They are definitely a market rent, prices, and they all rent within hours, not even days.
not the dollars, because that really shouldn't be thought about.
Right.
It's trying to understand the community you're designing.
There is amazing demand right now for those renovated apartments there, because everything is old, is neglected, and we are not building huge buildings. They are still conforming with the look of the street and the neighborhood, but the demand for nice, clean, renovated apartments is huge. And also proximity to the transit, to Bloomfield, New Jersey Transit, to Bay Street train station.
Oh, I know the values are all paid.
Right.
That we understand. But
Right, after the Bay Street train station was renovated a few years ago, this whole neighborhood changed, and is changing, every year is changing faster and faster.
Other questions connected to the board?
The porch, is it a covered porch?
It will have a roof, it will have nice front columns with the railing, but it's not going to be enclosed porch.
So from the second floor, I know it is not a dedicated entry, but could someone perpetually go out on that covered porch?
No. You mean on the back or on the front?
No, like in the front, like if they were to
No.
climb out
No,
the
no,
window
no,
to have
no.
access to that?
No, it will be sloped roof.
It'd be sloped, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I see, all right. And the only other thing is, just from a design perspective, just that dead space above the front door. Looks like from you're taking out a window from
Yeah,
the
we should
original.
add the window.
Yeah, I mean, it just, that's a tremendous amount of dead space, especially if you're proposing to use that vinyl look. So
And I
that's-
think it's a very good point, especially this will be part of the staircase, adding something nice there, smaller but nice with nice architectural detail will balance the right side of the house.
Yep.
And I think it's a great point, definitely.
Is there a market for renting single-family homes?
It's a two-family home.
I know what's being proposed.
Oh,
I'm saying if you made this a single-family home,
I don't know. I mean, from an investor perspective, that would not make sense.
why?
Because you would have to ask for a single-family home, double what you would ask for, like what you would ask for each unit. So it just doesn't make sense.
So what about, I mean, what's the use in that neighborhood? Is it already a mixture of multifamily and single-family?
Yes, correct. The whole neighborhood, the whole street is zoned R2, which is all two families. A house to the right is a two-family right now. Next to it, there is a church that was just renovated. Then next to it, there is a couple houses and then the school. And to the left, there is 1, 2 or 3 family house. And then there are big 6 and 8 family houses right on the same street, on the second one to the left.
Isn't there a property across the street that was subject of a recent approval from this board?
Yes, number 11 and 13 Washington Street, both were approved for variances for two-family homes.
In that application, they had a little chart trying to justify the four-family. They came in originally showing it was predominantly two families throughout the neighborhood, and they were pointing out a couple of buildings that were more than two families to justify the four-family, but we said given the overwhelming character of two families that existed in it being a two-family, we made them separate, and now they have a very deep hole in the ground for one of them, which is,
I think they just recently filled it up and they're actually starting to work on it.
Sunday, there was just
Oh,
hole.
still?
Yeah.
Maybe they are doing the foundation work. I don't know.
It is a two-family.
And it's, other than a few that are more, that's overwhelming the uses on the chart they showed in that application, two-family existing use.
2, and even Mr. Chairman, you mentioned before, there's 4
A few.
and 6 big, nice, beautiful buildings. They are 6, 8 buildings, right on the same block.
Other questions from members of the board? I want to go back to the porch because I'm trying to understand your drawing. So the property to the east, on the left-hand side as you're facing it, I mean, that porch actually encroaches on the right-of-way.
It does.
And you're going a little forward of the front wall of the house up there, but that's further than yours. On the house on the right, it's a little hard to tell from the drawing, but the house itself looks like it's set back a little bit further than your house. And then I can't tell if the porches exactly line up or if yours is a little closer to the property line than theirs, because there's no dimension and it's...
Right, the porch on the right side ends right here, and these are the steps for the porch, I think. But the porch itself ends there. The building we are talking about ends here. I would like to put the porch where the existing landing is.
No, I understand, though it's a little hard to judge that. If we impose the condition that your porch extend no closer to the front property line than the porch in the house to the west, is that acceptable?
Absolutely.
I can't deal with the one that encroaches. benefits. All I have. Any other questions from members of the board? Are there any members of the audience who have any questions, testimony, statements, anything further that you want to say concerning this application? Okay. Mr. Tremblant, do you want to do a very brief summary, since we just heard this in the past 20 minutes and our memories are not that bad?
I think the variances can be justified, but both under C2, given the size of the lot, and the constraints associated with that, as well as under C2. I mean, you have a house that's unoccupiable, the client purchased it, is prepared to spend a significant amount of money improving it, which will be a substantial improvement for the neighborhood, visually and otherwise, and I think the variances are reasonable and can be granted without any substantial detriment to the public good or any impairment to the master plan or zoning ordinance.
Start discussion with Mr. Church.
Looking at the neighborhood in which this property is located, it certainly is in need of renovations in that area, and it's occurring. It's occurring slowly, but it is occurring. I think that the property in question is very, very close to the where the fence is very, and makes the property very close to the sidewalk. I'd have a little concern about the porch coming out the way it does, because adjacent properties are, almost over onto the sidewalk. Other than that, I think that the need is certainly there for this type of dwelling, considering the gentrification of that area since the railroad has come all the way through, and the convenience for Bloomfield Avenue and public transportation has made that, starting to make that a very desirable area, and I wouldn't want to curtail that with the judgment that something should not be done to improve these buildings that are falling down. The only problem I have is with the porch, because of how close it seems to come to the front, to the sidewalk there. Other than that, the design that you presented is, to me, a vast improvement, and I would be in favor of the application with some restrictions possibly on the porch. But other than that, I'd be in favor of the app.
Mr. Fleischer.
I'm also in favor of the application with the condition indicated by the chair to pull that porch back or make it align with the porch to its immediate right as you face
Absolutely.
the buildings. The other one is, as the chair said, is actually over the property line. So
It
that's
is
a
the
whole-
one on the left.
That's a whole, yeah, the one on the left is actually over the property line. So with that condition, I'm in favor of the application.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. McCullough.
I can be supportive of the application as well. I guess with just two comments. One of them is, in terms of the first floor design, I find it a little odd for guests in that house to be stepping into the bedroom area. All of the living space, the common area is to the rear of the house, and so that feels a bit odd to me, but that's just my my feeling about it. The second comment is your reference to affordability, and that's something that I think not only I, but I think a lot of people are concerned about. That as this area is being transformed, that it may no longer be as affordable, and so. I just simply offer that as commentary, but outside of that, I can be supportive of this.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Simon.
I support the application.
Thank you, Mr. Simon.
Mr. Moore.
I'm in favor with the application. I think that this project will help to continue to bring the increased value to the neighborhood.
Thank you very much.
Graham, just so I don't forget, and can you make a note that for our annual report, two things. One, some kind of a recommendation dealing with this area. I'm not sure what it's going to be, but I don't want to forget about it. And I'll expand on that, discussing this application and more so on the next one. And two, I know Joe and I tried and failed on the lot width requirement, and I'm not saying go down to 30 feet here, but 60 feet is just plain ridiculous. And
I don't know of any lot that's 60 feet wide in the neighborhood.
I would like to make a recommendation that we have some relationship to the lot width requirement to what exists in the real world, and not say every single lot is non-conforming. And okay, I'm in favor of the application. I want to follow up on what Mr. McCulloch said. Is I have had nightmares since the Bay Street train station was developed, that what is, one of the areas that literally since it was developed has been an area of affordable housing, not in the COA sense, but in the real sense of it. And my nightmare was someone's going to come in and buy a row of 10 houses, tear them down, and build 3 single families, and that totally different clientele, and I suspect the market would be there for it as the neighborhood improved. The flip side of that is there are still a lot of rundown houses in the neighborhood, and I think, this applicant and others have been gradually making efforts to improve them one by one, and I much prefer that happening and keeping it consistent with the two-family zone, and that was the action we took on the application across the street. But, it's in one sense not a real issue for us, but I, want this to be remain as a working-class area, not for a bunch of
Careful.
I was going to denounce people of my ilk of empty nesters and others without kids moving in and saying, oh, I can walk to the train or walk to the bus on Bloomfield Avenue and do that. And, that I have no objection to them living there, but the price that it's charged is not something we can deal with, but it is, the town needs to have housing for all levels of income, and this is one of the areas that it's historically been provided. I'm in favor of the application. This is furthering the basic goal of the neighborhood of keeping it as a two-family zone. Virtually all the houses in the neighborhood have non-conforming front yards, non-conforming side yards. She's making the one side yard meeting to 6 feet and otherwise following the line of the house on the other side yard. The front yard, if we impose a condition, the porch be no closer to the property line than the porch on the house to the west, it's following, all the houses are built close to the street on the block. So I would be in favor with that condition. Someone want to make a motion?
Move approval of the application with the conditions noted by the chair.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Don't run away.
Don't run away, you got another one.
Yes, I'll just take the time.
The next application is for 81 Mission Street LLC, owner of property at 81 Mission Street, not surprisingly. This is an application for a variance to construct a new two-family dwelling. The property is in the R2 two-family zone. The property is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 28 and Block 3111. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 247-18E to permit a minimum lot width of less than the required 60 feet. A variance is also requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45B1 to permit a front yard setback for principal buildings of less than the required 25 feet. A variance is also requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45C1 to permit a minimum side yard setback for principal buildings of less than the required 6 feet. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Tremblant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alan Tremulak, again, appearing for the applicant. Same witness, same general neighborhood, somewhat similar application, although this involves a vacant lot on Mission Street, undersized. Chairman's comments regarding the lot width requirement is even more pertinent to this block of Mission Street, which has, I don't believe there's a conforming lot on at least this side of the street. Property previously contained a two-family structure which was demolished by, I believe, the bank that acquired the property in foreclosure. It was abandoned property. Was demolished. My client has purchased it with the intention of constructing a new two-family structure. There are 3 variances, as has been noted. One is for the non-conforming lot width. We have 37 feet, the requirement is 60, and we're actually probably one of the widest lots on this block, although non-conforming like all the other lots. Also a variance for front yard setback, and here again, you have the existing streetscape, all of the properties, I believe all, most if not all the properties, the structures are located very close to the street, and we're proposing a structure similar with the consistent with the streetscape, but non-conforming like all the other houses. And the third variance is a 1-foot variance for a 5-foot side yard on the northerly side of the property, whereas 6 is required. So I'd like to have Ms. Dolgan, I guess she needs to be sworn again. Mark.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes.
State your name and address, please.
Małgorzata Dogan, 46 West Valley Brook Road, Long Valley, New Jersey.
Ms. Dolgan, you're one of the owners of 81 Mission
Yes.
Street LLC, and the LLC recently purchased this property, is that correct?
That's correct.
And was there a dwelling on the property before you acquired it?
Yes, this is another property. I've been trying to buy this one for 2 years. Originally, I was trying to buy it from the owner that was in the foreclosure, then from the bank. Bank had it listed on auction.com a few times, and the sales, I don't know what happened, it didn't sell. And then the bank pretty much demolished the whole property and put it on the market as an empty land. Originally, I just wanted to make a correction, there was a 3-family house there, not a 2-family house. And this line over here, there is still existing footprint of, not footprint, like a foundation of the previous structure. And this line where it says black, this line, irregular line right here, indicates where the previous structure was.
Yeah, that's also shown on the survey too,
Yes, I
right?
was going to mention that.
Oh, yes, this is right. This is where the previous structure was.
Okay.
So the previous structure was right on the property line. We are moving the property back. We are putting a staircase over it, stairs to get in. We are improving both side yard setbacks. This one is 10 feet, and we are complying with the requirement. Here, the original setback was about 2 feet. We are asking for your permission for you to grant us 5 feet setback instead of 6 feet setback. So overall, we are improving the condition. We are using the existing driveway that was there, bringing it to the back of the property with 4 parking spaces.
Does the front of the house generally align with the front of the houses on the block?
Absolutely.
Okay. And you already indicated it's an improvement over what was there in terms, which had non-conforming front yard and side yards, correct?
Right.
Okay. And it's going to be a 2-family structure?
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
I mean, I would like to build 4, but I don't think I can ask for that. I'm trying to be reasonable.
Okay. And just point out one of the comments in Mr. Peto's memorandum, you understand that there's a requirement that you pay a development fee in connection with this? Okay. Really have nothing else, Mr. Chairman.
Questions, members of the board?
Have you made an effort to purchase the property adjacent?
No. On either one of the sides?
To the right?
No.
Facing the site?
No.
That the odd-shaped short property with the flag lot running behind it?
Yes, yes, and some weird garage thing going on all the way in the back.
I think that garage, maybe I'm probably wrong, that garage is on that same side. It's hard for me to figure out whether the garage is on that flag lot property or whether it's actually on the property I'm just speaking.
Yeah, I think, if we look at the aerial view, it looks like the garage belongs to the property, not right next to the right side, but the second one to the right.
The flag lot.
The flag lot, yeah,
I mean, we're talking about the same structure.
the same structure, yeah. But,
There's a very large garage, but that clearly that's back, but it's back further than your lot, that clearly belongs to the lot that's one lot over. But I think there's your plan is showing a garage that's, frontwards of your rear property line, and
Yeah, if you look on page,
It's on the other property.
if you look on page 3 of my memo, the photograph of the site, it's that two-car garage there. That garage is what's shown on the adjacent on the survey. That's shown on the short adjacent lot, is that garage shown.
and then behind that is
And behind that is the
garage.
second garage.
Yes.
So in fact, it is on the adjacent property.
Correct.
So that adjacent property is essentially an empty lot with that garage structure sitting in the back, as best I can see. I'm trying to imagine that there's an opportunity here to do something maybe bigger and better, not within the 37 foot. That's why I asked the question, whether you
I would
pursued
love
it.
to, if I could, I would love to do that.
Okay.
But my understanding was that, the board would like to keep that zone in that two-family neighborhood.
So let me go to the next question, which is the same argument I raised with that much more luxurious house on North Mountain. You're starting with a blank site. Obviously, this is not a 100-foot wide property, but when I look at it, and I see basically the house is made up of two 11-foot modules in terms of planning. If it was made up of two 10.5-foot wide modules, which I think would work just as well, you could then have a fully complying property line on the side, which would save you 1 foot, simply by taking 6 inches out of what I would call each side of this flat that we created, which really has two modules, two 11-foot wide modules plus the house. So my first question is, can we figure out a way of eliminating that 1 foot requirement and just taking note that what I'll call what is now the 20-foot wide plus partition, 22-foot wide plus partition, and making it 21-foot wide plus partition. And therefore, we don't have to grant a side yard variance, even if we grant other variances that we may need for.
Right, the partitions alone between the outside walls and the inside walls is almost a foot. So if I try to comply with the 6-foot setback, if you look at the bedrooms, right now the bedrooms inside are only 11 feet wide, which is not much, but it's not too bad.
Yeah, what I was saying is, could they be 10.5-foot wide each one?
They could be a 9, but...
I'm saying, no.
Right.
But I'm saying, if they could be 10.5-foot wide instead of 11-foot wide, then we don't have to grant that variance, because we would heat up the foot that you're now going closer. And it's tough enough when we're dealing with the narrow lot. And you've done a great plan here. And I look at the size, and I look at the units, and I'm saying, you know, that could be 6 inches less in each of those bedrooms, still be a very viable option. Wouldn't affect the layouts of the bathrooms, it wouldn't affect the layout strength of the kitchen. It would have minimal impact, but it wouldn't then require a width variance. Again, even on the narrow lot, you come up with a design that's virtually on the money for the yard. Why not be on the money for the 6 inches?
Correct. If I might, from my experience, that I'm also a builder. I'm an investor, but you don't see me dressed like this, right? I think, Alan, this is the first time you see me like this. 6 inches makes a really big difference in the bedrooms. I mean, it's we have only 2 bedrooms here, and they are only 12 feet long, 12.6. Adding that extra 6 inches, that's where, when I build the houses, when I build the bedrooms, it feels more spacious. It feels more, a little bit more luxurious. It feels more functional, you know, with the bed. So 6 inches on the bedrooms makes a huge difference. That's why I'm asking for that 1 foot variance. Also, if I may point something out here, the house on the right-hand side, where I'm asking for 5 feet variance, is over 12 feet away. It's not like this house is right on the property line.
Am I missing something?
First page.
That one.
So we got for Mission Street having 17 feet between houses. It's
No, it's great. I'm just looking for something that would be more in compliance when I think it's doable. If I didn't think it was doable, I wouldn't ask for it. It's like the same discussion I had the last time. I think there were solutions that were doable, and they were rejected. I'm offering something that I think is doable, that will not significantly impact your ability to market these units or anything else. You can say yay, or you can say nay.
Well, and let me follow up. I mean, in the Washington Street application, I understand you were working within an existing structure and a narrower lot, but you were proposing bedrooms of 10 foot 6 inches by 12 feet for 2 of the bedrooms, and for one of the bedrooms, for 3 of the bedrooms, and one of the bedrooms 9 feet 9 inches.
That would be more like an office.
But there was still 10-6
But-
in the other bedrooms.
You have 3 10-6 and 1 9-9. They're all the 12 or 12 foot 6 depth, but so it's clearly that's not preventing you from marketing it, because you did a whole speech about marketing those units. So
Right, but if we are making reference to 10 Washington, on 10 Washington, I got variance at 3.7 feet, and here it's 5.
But this is a new building.
Right, but, you were working in the existing constraints, and it's, and my suspicion is that over time, we are going to get an application for the lot next door that is not going to be keeping the same setback as the current house is, and we will push them to try and conform, given that they are conforming on that side.
There is a driveway here on this side of the property, so I don't think they would want to change the setback and sacrifice the driveway.
Where is
They
this?
have a driveway
It's the
right on
angle
where the
house.
12 feet setback is, that's where the driveway is.
Yeah, but they could still move it 2 feet closer and keep the 10 feet for the driveway.
Oh, sure, yes.
Yeah, I mean, so it's not, I'll stick that that's not a given.
Right.
It's just, I mean, you heard the discussion on the prior application that, you have an opportunity, and there is the issue of conforming if you can, and the other part of the issue on Mission Street in general is the houses are very close together in general, and having a little open space and air in the neighborhood is not a bad idea to give a more open feel to things. Okay.
Absolutely. If I may point out two things. It's definitely an improvement from what it was there before, because prior setback was only 2 or 3 feet. And also 10 and 6-foot setbacks are designed with 60 feet wide lots. This lot is 37.
No, the 10 and 6 applies to a whole variety of lot sizes and,
Right, but
I mean, lot
maybe
widths, but
six,
not just 60 feet. There are zones with a 50-foot that have much larger lots, but that's a different editorial comment. But it's, that there are areas in town that have a smaller lot frontage requirement that also have the 10 and 6 feet in
Right.
both 1 and 2 family zones.
But I don't think any lot on Mission Street meets even the minimum, the smallest requirements that the town has.
I mean, we can keep going with this. Well, we're talking about a foot. You think you ought to be able to do it. And you can go through the thing and say, it just won't work for me if I take that foot out, and therefore, who knows, maybe I won't do the development. But we're suggesting that it would be better and make everybody's life better if you could take a foot out of the width of the building and therefore maintain the required yard lines. That's what we're suggesting.
Yeah, don't you have, if you were to take that foot off the width, couldn't you go deeper in the lot to recapture the bedroom size? Like instead of, just go further back into
Yeah, the bedrooms would get longer and narrow, slightly narrower, but they could get longer.
So you still get the overall square footage of the bedroom, and again, probably requiring a variance. So just for numbers, just to say go by 10 by 14 in the bedrooms, and in that way you'd be applying 25.
If we do that, then this whole design here will not work.
Right. If you just go further back, I'm just saying push it back.
Push it back at 3.
She's talking about the width of the bathroom
Right,
floor.
because I have
Oh,
a
oh.
certain, the toilet and the shower have to be certain size to comply with the building codes. The hallway has to be certain, it has to be minimum 3 feet to comply with the building codes. The bathroom here, the bathtub, and the walkway here. So if I make it more narrow, this design, which I think is the most efficient design for that small house, doesn't work. And
Well, if you go deeper, then those closets that you do have in those hallways, you can relocate, right, potentially, if you have room to go deeper.
correct, but then we lose that nice privacy entrance to this bedroom and this bedroom on the back here. Then if I remove the closets, I mean, of course, we can make it work, but I just thought that would be just the nicest layout for the small.
Before I
Yeah,
turn,
it's really just going, not to sound hypocritical, like, you're starting with a clean slate, so why not just do it correctly?
Right, well, you're right.
and then to do my follow-up on what Mr. McCulloch said on the last one, the other one, you were having people walk into the house next to the bedroom, so I'm not sure how excited you are about where the bedrooms are where people are walking. I understand the desirability, but having the same, 2 applications back-to-back leads one of us to pay attention to what the differences in the designs. And okay, any other questions from members of the board? Are there any members of the audience who have questions, statements, testimony, anything you want to say about this application? Mr. Trembulak, is there anything further you wish to say?
I have nothing, I couldn't say anything better or more than what my client has said regarding the setback variance.
Okay, Mr. Fleischer?
Again, I would like to see the design modified slightly so that the width of the building can be narrowed down to what is necessary to provide for the 6-foot lot. I think it's quite doable. I don't want to set the different standards on the new construction, even on an undersized lot, which I agree this is. On the other hand, you have plenty of room in the depth that you can figure out some minor modifications to what I'll call the toilet kitchen core that will allow it to still give you all those privacy concerns you have, still stay within the lot coverage, that you conform with. So I believe that modifications could be made, and so I would place a condition on this, that we grant approval of the project, but without the side yard variance. And then I leave it to your ingenuity as to what the alternative or modified plan would be, that could probably then be reviewed by Mr. Petto or others. Of course, it probably meets all other criteria other than that side yard.
Except the front yard.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I have no problem
Okay.
granting you I have no problem, others may. I have no problem granting you a front yard. I have more problem granting you side, because frankly, I think all those houses need a little more breathing room. Sometimes it's virtually impossible. Other times it's possible, and in this case, we can actually say that this approval conformed with the side yards with the separation of structures from side to side. So that's my comment, and I'll wait to hear what others say, but that's my sense.
Mr. McCullough,
I agree with Mr. Fleischer.
Mr. Simon,
I also agree. I think you have room to play with. Yeah.
and Mr. Moore.
I too agree with my colleague, Mr. Fleischer.
Mr. Church.
Yeah, I would agree with my colleagues on this one. I approve it.
Okay. I also agree and be in favor of granting the front yard variance, granting the lot width variance, and denying the side yard variance, and it should have the condition that it comply with the residential development fee. And someone want to make a motion?
Move approval of the application with the conditions noted by the chair.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll take a break until 10 o'clock, and the next applicant can get set up for the more interesting application of the evening.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back on the record.
The next application is requesting certification of the pre-existing non-conforming use of the subject property, which is known as 15 Oxford Street, Block 4308, Lot 51, that it's a pre-existing non-conforming three-family residential dwelling. And I think that's all I have to do. So are the taxes paid, I think is all I need to, everything's set
Yes,
to go?
and the applicant did complete notice as well.
Okay. So, want to proceed?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for staying late tonight. I hope this application does not disappoint. My name is Michael Piramali of the law firm Gassion Pamaco, 524 Union Avenue in Belleville. Here tonight on behalf of applicant Frank Amabile, who is the owner of 15 Oxford Street, also known as Block 4308, Lot 51 on the Montclair tax maps. Mr. Amabile has come before the board tonight to request that the Montclair Zoning Board of Adjustment certify the pre-existing non-conforming use of 15 Oxford Street as a three-family dwelling. The subject property is presently located in the R2 residential two-family zone, which does not permit the use of the property as a three-family. In order to provide some background as to how this application found its way before this board, Mr. Amabile came to our office a few months ago after an inspection was conducted of his property by the Montclair Building Department, and they told him it was a legal two-family but not a legal three-family. This was an independent inspection that was done by Montclair at the request of Montclair. No cause for it other than they decided to send him a letter and asked to come in and inspect. So Mr. Amabile came into our office, explained that his family had owned the home since 1958 and that the home had originally been constructed as a two-family dwelling way back in 1912, but was converted to a three-family dwelling by his father around 1985. His late father, Anthony Amabile, renovated the third floor at that time, which had previously been attic space connected to the second floor.
65.
1965, it was converted. Oh, I apologize.
That's okay.
Oh, thank you. 1965. 1965. Quite a long time ago, 55 years or so. So Mr. Amabile came into our office with a considerable amount of paperwork to prove the conversion to the three-family use going way back there to 1965. I reviewed that information over the course of a month or so. I also requested that the Montclair Zoning and Building Department provide whatever records they had on file as well, and requested that the Montclair Tax Assessor provide their records also. After finally all the municipal responses to our information requests were received, I made a visit to the Essex County Planning Board offices to review the prior versions of the Montclair zoning ordinances and zoning maps, which were in effect both before and immediately after the conversion took place in 1965. So with that background, I'd like to briefly summarize what is and what is not contained in the, I'm sorry to say, voluminous application packages before you. What is clear after having reviewed these documents is that this is not your traditional certification application. What we had hoped to find was that the conversion to a three-family dwelling occurred at a time when such a use was permitted in the zone, but the zone had later changed. That is unfortunately not the case here. Within the application package, I provide you with both copies of the Montclair zoning maps and zoning ordinances in effect in 1965 at the time of the conversion to the three-family use. At that time and presently, the property is still located in an R2 zone, two-family zone, single-family, two-family zone, three-family not permitted. However, in support of the certification, I have also provided you with a copy of a record card from the Montclair Building Department memorializing a conversion to a three-family on January 28, 1965, although rather cryptically as alt reside dwelling, which we believe was actually intended to indicate an alteration to the building to add a residential dwelling unit and not to add new siding. I've also provided Montclair tax records indicating the property has been continuously taxed as a three-family dwelling since at least 1988 to the present. Probably before that, but I did not receive any records prior to 1988 from the Montclair tax assessor. Unfortunately, no additional records from Montclair were available to try to determine what steps had been taken in 1965 or prior to permit the conversion to the three-family use. Although we were not able to locate any additional records from Montclair, Mr. Amabile did provide me with two sets of blueprints, the first being for the initial construction of the home in 1912, which showed two dwelling units, first floor, second floor, and a third floor attic space connected to the second floor. In addition, he provided a second set of blueprints for the conversion of the three-family dwelling The attic space was then converted to a dwelling unit, an independent dwelling unit. And those plans he provided were stamped by the New Jersey Bureau of Tenement Housing Supervision on March 10th, 1965. I've also provided with this application a certification from the New Jersey Bureau of Law and Public Safety, Bureau of Tenement Housing Supervision, which certified the property as an approved tenant house, also dated March 10th, 1965. I have Mr. Ramabile here with me tonight to provide some personal insight into the situation, but what I am left to conclude after reviewing the information and materials I have provided to the board is that a conversion of 15 Oxford Street occurred on or about 1965, which was at least recognized by the Montclair Building Department and Montclair Tax Assessor, as well as the appropriate division of the New Jersey State, which dealt with tenement houses at the time of the conversion. We also have Mr. Ramabile's older sister here, Adrian, and if the board would like to hear from her as well, she is present in the audience. I truly believe that the evidence before this board will show not an illegal conversion from a 2- to 3-family dwelling, but a record which indicates that the applicant's late father, Anthony Amabile, completed this conversion with plans prepared by a professional architect, but the municipal records, likely due to the passage of over 50 years since the conversion, is unfortunately devoid of any municipal approvals which would validate the 3-family use. Again, this is not the traditional certification application here. The argument here is based on either a use variance was sought and granted, or building permits were issued for the 3-family use, perhaps wrongfully, over 50 years ago, which the applicant has since relied on, and Montclair has since taxed as a 3-family dwelling. So with your permission, Mr. Chairman, if there are no questions of me with regard to the particulars of this application or the application materials submitted, I would call my first and hopefully only witness.
Okay, I have questions for you.
Of course.
I am not understanding how legally we do what you want us to do is, I guess, my difficulty. The municipal land use law is set up so, and I actually served as an expert witness in a case where we went back to 1877 when the property was subdivided, and went through the whole history up through 2017, 16, whatever it was, as to the use of the property and the zoning from the time that the municipality adopted zoning in 1922, which was a fun 4-hour experience testifying, but there was neighborhood opposition, obviously, with an attorney, which added to my fun. But that was showing the use pre-existed, the change in zoning from commercial to residential. Here, you have conceded, the information you have submitted shows that at the time the house was converted to a 3-family, it was in a 2-family zone. So I understand your dilemma, but I'm not sure how this board has the authority to solve the dilemma. And I guess I want you to address that, and I want Mr. Sullivan to address that.
That's fair. If possible, I'd like to crack at it first.
Be my guest.
Thanks. So considering the situation that faced our applicant when he first came in the door, good lawyering requires that we had to consider the options that are available to the applicant, right? So we've got a situation whereby the property's been used as a 3-family since 1965 and taxed as a 3-family at least since 1988, probably prior, but we can prove at least since 1988 through present. So what are our options? We could file a suit with the Essex County Superior Court based on a estoppel argument, but with that being said, we'd still have to be here. Number one, our client doesn't wish to file a lawsuit against the town. That's the last thing they want to do. But they would have to exhaust their administrative remedies to do that anyway. So we'd be before this board seeking either a certification or a use variance, one of the two.
Or both.
Or both, exactly correct. So we would exhaust our administrative remedies, and potentially that would be the only other option. Again, not that our client ever intended to do that, just good lawyering requires that we go through our options with the client. So considering the cost and expense of a use variance application, which would be the other administrative remedy application that we could file, we tried to go the certification route first. Now, I understand that what we're requesting is not in the typical grounds for a certification application, but I do not think it is outside of what the board can grant. Specifically, when you look at Cox and Koning's treaties, we deal with creation by ordinance, and we deal with non-conforming uses that are created by other non-conforming structures or uses that are created by other means. So while NJSA 40:55D-68 which provides the avenue to seek a certification of a non-conforming structure or use from this board, does not specifically speak to by other means. Judicially, the New Jersey courts have found that other avenues have been, are able to be approved or granted a certification of pre-existing nonconformity by boards. Specifically, it has been limited thus far to situations where there is a government taking via eminent domain, and these are basically non-conforming structures or non-conforming lots that are created by a government taking. What we're asking for here is expansion of that existing traditional doctrine. So what we suggest here is an expansion to include also not only non-conforming structures or non-conforming lots, but also to include a non-conforming use where there is a government taking. So in this situation, our argument would be that by taxing this lot, since 1988 is a three-family, and now later on saying that this lot is a two-family only, and depriving my client of the use of that additional dwelling unit, that would be a partial government taking that this board can correct by virtue of a certification of a non-conforming structure or use.
But
Somewhat circuitous, and I agree, it's an expansion of the existing law, and I don't know about you all, but I'd love to create new law. Not sure Mr. Sullivan would agree.
The problem is you don't really get to create it at the zoning board level. I don't know, Mr. Harrison, did you want to address that, or do you want me to?
You can go.
Yeah, I mean, the governmental taking case really doesn't apply here. And we need to deal with precedent. And even if we assume everything that you said in your opening argument is true, the problem that you're running into, as I look at it, and I struggled this. I spoke to you on the phone today. First thing we said was this is completely opposite to what we would normally see as part of a 68 certification application.
And I agree.
Really what you're asking for is a certification that this is a non-conforming use. Non-conforming use is a defined term in the municipal land use law, and it says it's a use or activity which was lawful prior to the adoption, revision, or amendment of a zoning ordinance, but which fails to conform to the requirements of the zoning district in which it is located by reason of such adoption, revision, or amendment. I think you'll agree that's not what happened here.
I agree that is.
So I think what the chairman raised initially as a threshold issue is what you're asking for within the confines of the MLUL really can't be granted. I think there's a peculiar set of facts. You would have thought that it's somewhere a zoning approval, a use variant would have been granted somewhere prior to that January 65 construction, but it's not there. And absent that, it just doesn't fall within the confines of the 68 certification. That's what I see. And again, it's extremely unusual. It doesn't bar you from filing an application for a use variance, but I'm just not sure how we're getting there based on a careful review of the statutory definition.
And I agree this would absolutely be an expansion of what's previously been done by boards and what's previously been approved by the courts. Again, the creation of a non-conforming use by other means, as referenced in the Cox-Maconing Treaty, has specifically been limited to governmental takings with regard to eminent domain and non-conforming lots and non-conforming structures. It has not been extended thus far to non-conforming uses, but that's not to say that it shouldn't be.
The other point that you made was you alluded to an estoppel argument, and there is case law that talks about estoppel against municipalities, but there's also case law that says estoppel is a legal argument that's really suited into the courts and not for the boards of adjustment to make. So that is an argument that you may make in the Superior Court, but really not in front of us.
And I agree.
Okay, let me, before we figure out how best to proceed or not proceed, have you asked, under the predecessor to the municipal land use law that was in effect when, the procedure was basically the same, the only difference was that boards of adjustment made recommendations to the governing body, but the process, the legal requirements for a variance, other than inherently beneficial uses, which are new add-ons, but was the same under the predecessor statute. Have you looked at all into either minutes of the Board of Adjustment from back in that time period or minutes of the governing body?
Yes, I have. I requested all of that information from Montclair. What you see is the sum total of what I received with regard to,
Okay,
and my assumption would be they've provided everything that they have on file. It's not that I'm in any way intimating that they have not provided everything. I'm fully believing that they have. I just think that perhaps something was missed here, and that this certification avenue would have been a route that my client could take, other than a use variance application, that might possibly get us to a place where he's made whole and the situation is resolved. That was my thought. I would not be here asking this if I didn't think that this was within the board's jurisdiction to grant. I understand that we may disagree.
I also get to be creative as a land use lawyer, too, and I understand that this was the most efficient way to proceed, but I don't think, I guess, and where I'm concerned on this is that, I'm going to say it would be exceedingly odd that there would, if a variance was granted back in the 60s, that it would not be showing up in either Board of Adjustment or Planning Board minutes or agenda, which leads me to believe. Now, having said that, in the application I was involved in, after we did not get as much information as we thought from the municipality, we went to the municipal library where they had archival records, that we dug up stuff that was not available in the municipal records that was extremely helpful, and why it wasn't in the municipal records I didn't understand, but and this was going back a longer time period than you're doing, but we were very glad the municipal library had the records, and but so there might be other avenues, but going back, I guess, let me do a suggestion, because I mean, I'm assuming Mr. Amabile can't do anything more than say what you've submitted is his understanding, his recollection.
That is correct.
And, so I think I want to give you something that at least gets you to court if you want to go. I mean, I can't solve the problem where, I mean, my view would be you need to apply for the use variance and be denied. I think...
I would agree that would be the course of action
but
to
I
exhaust
think,
administrative remedy.
I mean, and Mr. Sullivan, I mean, would it be appropriate for us to say, we have reviewed all the information that was submitted, and based on the information that was submitted, that since the conversion occurred at a point in time that the zoning was R2 and did not allow the three-family use, that we're denying the requested certification, so that piece is
Yes.
gone? and-
Yes.
Okay, so let me, since I believe there are people in the audience who I assume were not that entertaining that they came here instead of watching TV or tonight, is there anyone in the public who has anything to say concerning this application? Okay, you want to come forward and give your name and address and be sworn in?
Why don't you come to the microphone right here? Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes.
State your name and address, please.
Adrian Vento, 7 Park Avenue, Englishtown, New Jersey. As I recall, I grew up at 15 Oxford Street, and we always had a renter. Yes, that I remember. We always had renters on the 3rd floor.
Yeah, I think we're assuming for the purpose of this hearing that is the case. That doesn't get us around the legal hurdle of the 68 certification.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the audience who have anything to say about this application? Okay, so is there anything further you want to add before we, I think, just vote, see if there's any discussion among the board members, and then we vote?
No, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the board's time. I appreciate everyone's opinions here. This is certainly not the traditional certification that we were looking for. We saw it as a possible means to an end, and certainly it would have been an expansion of existing law. But with that being said, what are we doing lawyering unless we're looking to expand.
No,
expand
I have...
I would have done the same thing, just, so, you know.
I view it as it was worth a try on your part, and I think, let me do, and then just if any other members have to add, I mean, I think it's been indicated that, I've reviewed in detail everything that was submitted by the applicant. I think what was submitted clearly indicates that at the time the house was converted to a three-family dwelling, and for a number of years before that, the property was in an R2 zone. It has remained in an R2 zone ever since, and that as a result, it is that this board cannot grant a certification that the use was a pre-existing non-conforming use pursuant to NJSA 40:55D-68, and as a result, I think the board should deny it. Are there any other board members have any comments, statements, anything you want to say about this?
Is that a motion, then?
Okay, then, okay, I move that we deny the requested certification.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll presumably see you again, but I checked the law. I mean, I have a significant concern that for whatever reason, a variance wasn't granted, and I don't know how that affects the use variance application, but we're not unsympathetic. I don't know that that means anything in terms of how we act on use variance, but it's just like a missing gap here, and and it might be worthwhile you were sending some associate, which is a tack I took, to go. Both probably spend time looking through your own on the municipal records and then going to the library and see what they have, and maybe looking through back editions of the Montclair Times to see if they reference anything concerning this. And as I said, in the one we were involved in, it proved to be a fruitful task, and might find something. And, the ideal result is you find documentation that a variance was granted and you're home free. And we'll not see you again. Okay.
Again, I thank the board very much for his time. Have a good evening.
Okay, is there a motion to we're doing the meeting?
Yeah, so just to announce for the board, we'll next meet on December 18th, Wednesday, December 18th.
And we'll do the meeting schedule for next year?
Yes, and we're going to be doing the meeting schedule, which I passed out at the last board meeting. I gave copies of the proposed schedule. I'll email it out to everybody as well before the December 18th.
I already know I'm not going to be for the February date that's proposed.
I won't be here for February no matter what day.
So we'll share that around, and we'll adopt the schedule then on December 18th.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Good night. And